We are looking at chapter 2, exchange, what is going on. To begin with, let me just explain to you what this chapter is about, and then we'll go into the details. The devil is in the details, as they say. So in the time that Marx was writing, and before him as well, naturally, from Smith all the way to Ricardo, Mill, and so on, there were two large groups of thought in the field of political economy or economics as a whole about how and what money represented. They were the metalists, for example, on the one hand, and the nominalists on the other. That's not what they called themselves, that's just the name that we give them today. For one group of thinkers that includes Adam Smith, Ricardo, Senior, and Mill, all of whom are very, very big names in the history of economic thought, the value of money was based on an intrinsic value in the gold or in the silver. When we use this term intrinsic value, we do not mean that it has value because labor is embodied in it. What we mean, what economists meant at that time, was that it has value as a consequence of its physical properties. So the physical properties of gold and silver, they thought, is what made it money. Money was based, in their view, on the rarity, durability, and inherent demand of gold and silver. This, of course, view you also see even today when you study economics today. You will hear these expressions, rarity, durability, and so on. But these ideas now are completely out of date because today we have money which is electronic money. So the question of its durability is completely irrelevant. It's not a physical thing anymore. And the question of its rarity is even more irrelevant because electronic money is just giving each other credit on a computer screen, which is not going to be rare for that reason. So I think in today's day and age, it is palpably clear that money does not owe its value to any intrinsic quality because of gold and silver. Because if that were the case, it would have been impossible for electronic money to have existed as such. Marx makes the same argument, in fact, with respect to paper money and token money, etc. But nonetheless, this was one view in his time, and he is going to challenge this. That's the first purpose of this chapter. The second purpose is the opposite view, which was the nominalist view, which was the view that money has no value at all. All of it is a social construct. Money is only a symbol, and it has no inherent value. It has no value whatsoever. This was the view of George Frederick Knapp and Proudhon, whom we have already met in the life of Marx, John Law, Henry George, Silvio Gesell, etc. And Marx thought both these schools of thought were incorrect. He tries to show that money, firstly, is the inevitable result of exchange. Where you have exchange, you're going to have a medium of exchange, and that medium of exchange, of course, is money. Exchange develops the value form. This is a very important aspect of his argument. It develops that formula that I taught you, X commodity A is equal to Y commodity B, where it equates values with each other. That is the value form. What this means, of course, is that exchange develops the practice whereby commodities are equated in relation to the labor embodied within them. That's what it means to say that exchange develops the value form. The prices then start conforming to what? To the labor embodied in them. The money commodity is also a product of labor. We are talking here not about electronic money. I deliberately put the money commodity here. So we're talking about gold and silver, a commodity that is used as money. So money commodity is also the product of labor, and hence the money commodity is the socially recognized universal equivalent. It becomes the commodity in which all other commodities, the value of all other commodities is measured. You don't measure the value of all commodities in all commodities, which would be an insanely long series of equations. You just measure it in one commodity. That becomes the standard for everything else. It becomes the measure of value. So let's look at how Marx approaches this question. He says, in order that commodities may enter into relations with each other, their guardian must place themselves in relation to one another. Commodities, he says, cannot get up and go themselves to the market and exchange themselves, or they don't have any will or power. Who has the will and power? The owners of those commodities. So when I exchange with you, I recognize that you are the owner of your commodity, and you recognize that I am the owner of my commodity. We, in other words, have already recognized each other as private proprietors, private owners of the things that we're exchanging. You might think, well, that's self-evident, isn't it? Or you might think, isn't that always the case? Marx answers, no, that's not actually always the case. It was not always the case that an individual would be the owner of that particular property. It could be that the tribe owned it. It could be that the family as a whole owned it, etc., etc. This juridical relation, even regardless of whether it is written down or not written down as a law, it is still a juridical relation. It's a law that we have established between ourselves, whether in the written form or in the form of a convention, is between two wills. Two wills se matlab ye hai, it is your will and it is my will, and we have accepted that I will treat you as a owner of your property and you will treat me the same way, and is the reflex of the real economic relations between the two. In other words, the fact that these commodities are entering into this exchange is actually a relationship between the people who are exchanging them, not between the commodities. That's the aspect that we covered in section 4 of chapter 1, which was the fetishism of the commodity, which is often, by the way, misunderstood. Now, when I take a commodity to the market, I will only take it to the market if it is a non-use value for me. It is not useful to me. Otherwise, if it's useful to me, I'll use it myself. Why should I give it to somebody else? Why should I sell it? And on the other hand, if you have bought it from me, the assumption is it is useful to you in some way or the other. Doesn't matter how it's useful to you, why it's useful to you is irrelevant. Why it's useless to me, all of that is irrelevant. But I'm not going to part with it. I'm not going to alienate it. I'm not going to give it away. I'm not going to exchange unless it's useless to me and is useful to you. That's obvious and self-evident. Commodities must be realized as values before they can be realized as use values. What does this mean? To put it in very simple words, they must be exchanged in order to be used. Because it's useless to me, I'm not going to use it. It's only going to be used once it's exchanged. It's useful to you. Then when you have it, then you use it. So they have to be exchanged. They have to be realized as values in order to be realized as use values. And opposite be true. Commodities must also show that they are use values before they can be realized as values. This simply means that nobody is going to buy it unless it's useful to them. Okay? So both things are quite obvious. Now, owners can only bring their commodities into relation as values by comparing them with one other commodity as the universal equivalent. In the formula that we saw, my commodity, the value of my commodity is valued in the use value of your commodity, and vice versa. The value of your commodity is in the use value of my commodity. Your commodity is the equivalent of my commodity is the equivalent of your commodity. And in this formula already, I am, in a certain sense, valuing it in terms of another commodity. And through a social process, he says, one commodity becomes the universal equivalent and is therefore regarded as money. We can't keep doing this all the time, that when, have an infinite set of equations or have a set of equations as long as the number of commodities. So we say, okay, we're going to evaluate all the commodities in terms of one commodity. We're going to consider that the universal equivalent, and all commodities will be, their value will be in that one commodity. That one commodity, by social convention, whatever that may be, becomes, he says, the universal equivalent, and that universal equivalent commodity, that commodity becomes the money commodity. So money, therefore, he says, is a crystal formed by a social act. Imagine that we are all trading what with each other? Not money. That's not what we want. What we want to trade with each other are the commodities that we produce. The fact of the trade with each other produces something else. It produces money. It's not the money we're interested in per se. It's the commodities that are useful to us. The money is only useful to us because it is used to get commodities. So in a certain sense, the act of exchange, wherever exchange develops, money will inevitably develop. Money is not a sazish by some shaitan that it came into existence. It came into existence because it is a necessity developed as a consequence of exchange. That's how it develops. He says, but a particular commodity cannot become the universal equivalent except by a social act. It's not God that's going to do it. It's not going to happen automatically. It's going to be by our agreement that this is going to happen. The social action, therefore, of all other commodities sets apart the particular commodity in which they all represent their values. Thereby, the bodily form of this commodity becomes the form of the socially recognized universal equivalent. In other words, it becomes the money commodity. He's just saying that we all have to come to agree that this commodity will be the universal equivalent, and then that will be the money commodity. And money is a crystal formed as a necessity of this course of interaction, exchange. As the conversion of products into commodities being accomplished, so also is the conversion of one special commodity into money. So one commodity will become money once commodity exchange just develops as a consequence of the exchange. It's not money that's creating the exchange here. It's exchange that's creating money. That's what you have to be clear about. He says the form, here's the answer to your question. He says the form of direct barter is this. X commodity with use value A is exchanged for Y number of commodities for use value B. That's how initially things began. I needed what you had, you needed what I had. So I needed what you had really, really bad. And you didn't really need what I had so badly. What would happen in that situation is that you would have the upper hand because you don't really need what I have, but I really want what you have. So what happens? You're able to dictate the terms of trade. Think of it in this way. Remember when we were kids and we were sitting next to each other on our desks, and your friend had a really nice, amazing eraser that looked so nice, or they brought a really nice new pencil. It's just so like cool. It had fairies on it or whatever, right? Or it had Iron Man on it or whatever, right? And you really wanted it, and you said, do you want to make a trade? And I said, no, I really like my new pencil. Mommy just got it from me yesterday. Like, please, can we make this trade? Like, okay, what do you offer? Like, oh, I can offer you this pencil. This is an ordinary HB kind of pencil. You're like, this is ordinary. I give you 2. I give you 3. I give you 4. Okay, here, take the pencil box. Please give me that, etc. So what is happening here is that the interaction between these two children, in my hypothetical example, which has happened to me many times, was based purely on whether they wanted it more or you wanted their thing more. That was what it was based on. This is how it all begins. The article A and B, he says, therefore, are not yet commodities. This is very interesting. Even though they're exchanging, he says if something is exchanging on the basis of its use value, it is not a commodity. Oh my God, this is so confusing. Because in traditional economics, we have been taught to understand that anything that you can buy with money is a commodity. All goods and services, whatever they are. Even if I buy the fact that I don't want the police wala to give me a challan, in traditional neoclassical economics or whatnot, we would consider that to be something that I paid for a service or for not doing a service, etc. That's not how Marx looks at it at all. He distinguishes this kind of exchange from commodity exchange. He says, what is going on over here when those two kids are exchanging pencils and sharpeners, etc., on the basis of use value, those are not commodities. Very strange to say that. Okay, Mr. Marx, if you say that, then tell us what is a commodity. The proportions in which they are exchangeable are at first quite a matter of chance. It can be any proportion. It can just be that one guy can talk so well that he can convince the other guy to give him his old pencil case or whatever. They are purely a consequence of chance. There's no real law operating over here, he says. Now listen carefully, this is very important. In the course of time, through constant repetition of exchange, some portion of the products of labor are produced in order to be with a special view to exchange. In other words, in the course of time, certain products are created with the only view that I'm creating this so that I will go and sell it to the other person. Now he says a transformation begins to take place. From that moment, the distinction becomes firmly established between the utility of an object for the purpose of consumption and its utility for the purposes of exchange. Now the thing that's being produced is being produced for the only purpose of trading it. It has no use value to me except that I'm going to sell it and then I'm going to buy something with that money which has use value to me. Its use value therefore becomes distinguished from its exchange value. The two things now depart. Now this law is no longer applicable. When things are in constant production and reproduction and produced with the intention of being sold, etc., a new law comes into being, and that is this law. X commodity A is equal to Y commodity B, where X, of course, is the quantity, commodity A is the value in terms of labor embodied in it, and Y is a quantity and commodity B is the value of labor embodied in it. Now, the trade takes place on the basis not of utility. It's no longer a chance, random utility kind of exchange. They are being created to be exchanged. They are being regularly exchanged. And now another law comes into operation, which is to look at how much time and effort and labor it takes to create those commodities. If I am taking a lot of time, labor and effort to create my commodity, and you are taking very little time and effort to create your commodity, both these commodities are being produced with the purpose of exchange. I will not want to trade with you unless you offer to me an equivalent of what I'm offering to you in terms of the time, labor, work, effort that I've done, etc. I want the equivalent of the work I've done from you. That's what begins to happen. That's how situation transforms. In order for exchange to take place, it is only necessary for men, by a tacit understanding, to treat each other as private owners of those alienable objects and by implication as independent individuals. Yes, we've established that. But such a state of reciprocal independence has no existence in a primitive society based on property in common. OMG. We have been taught, and Smith also says, that somehow or the other it's human nature to truck, barter and exchange. If you look at economics, they almost teach you as if from the dawn of mankind we were trading with each other. Sometimes they even make pictures of Australopithecus trading with another Australopithecus or something. He says this is not what is happening in history at all. It's untrue. It's not human nature to truck, barter and exchange. No. This process of exchange itself has a history of development. The development of the market, the development of exchange, the development of commerce, the development of trade is not natural. It's an evolutionary process. It happens with time. In a primitive society based on property in common, it did not and could not have happened. Whether such a society takes the form of a patriarchal family, an ancient Indian community, a Peruvian Inca state, in all of these societies, he says, this idea that you are the private owner of your property and I am the private owner of my property did not exist. Hence, this kind of trade that we see in capitalism, that we see in commerce, that we see in the market could not have come into being. The exchange of commodities did happen, but it first began on the boundaries of such communities, at their points of contact with other similar communities or with members of the latter. In other words, in those ancient time periods when trade happened, it was not between two individuals who were the owners of their property, but it was between one tribe as a whole and another tribe as a whole. Wow. Isn't that fascinating? And what I am selling now to that other tribe is the property, not my property, it's the property, collective property of the tribe. And what I'm buying from that other tribe is the collective property of their tribe. That's really how trade began, he says. Because the tribe does not acknowledge or accept your private ownership over the produce that has happened within the tribe. That's collective ownership. The proportion in which they are exchangeable are at first quite a matter of chance. What makes them exchangeable is the mutual desire of their owners to alienate them. Meantime, the need for foreign objects of utility gradually establishes itself. In other words, even when these tribes exchange with each other, at first, the basis of their exchange is just a matter of chance, and it is a matter of their desire of the other item. It's not based on value, it's not based on production, this is not commodity exchange properly speaking. They interact with another tribe, they're like, oh my God, you have these beautiful beads, we really like them. What can we give you in exchange for them? That's it. It's a very chance interaction. So that's how it first occurs. Meantime, the need for foreign objects of utility gradually establishes itself. Now that the tribe starts to get silk, or starts to get spices, or starts to get incense, which smells really nice, they want more and more of it. They're like, we like this stuff, we want more of it. Get more of it from that tribe that got it for us the last time around. The constant repetition of exchange makes it a normal social act. In the course of time, therefore, some portion at least of the product of labor must be produced with a special view to exchange. So in the first instant when I went to that tribe and I got it, they probably had produced it for themselves. But I said, no, give it to me. When that exchange occurred, it occurred on the basis of utility. But then I said to them, I really like this, give more to me. Then you people think, in that other tribe, listen, this is good, this is a great idea. We can just produce more of this than we need, and we'll sell it to those people. And in exchange for that, we'll get whatever it is that they produce. Maybe it's wheat or it's something else. You see? From that moment, the distinction becomes firmly established between the utility of an object for the purpose of consumption and its utility for the purpose of exchange. So now, there are things that are produced for your self-consumption, and there are things that are produced only for one purpose. We're going to sell them. And its use value becomes distinguished from its exchange value at this point. On the other hand, the quantitative proportion in which the articles are exchangeable now, the quantity in which we're exchanging them, the exchange value, becomes dependent on their production itself. Now the trade is going to become dependent not on how much you want it or how much I want it, but on the process of production. What it costs you to produce, what it costs me to produce, how much time your tribe had to spend making this thing, how much time my tribe had to making this thing. I'm going to say, look, it took us a lot of time, man. How can I give this to you? You just spent 5 minutes on it. I'm not giving this to you. I spent 5 days on it. Just imagine in your own mind, if you spend 5 days making something, and somebody else spent 5 minutes making that same or something else, and you were entered into a trade, would you say, oh yeah, you give me this and I'll give you this? No, you would say, dude, I spent so much time making this, give me something equal. Give me more of what you made, at least enough, that's 5 days. Then I will make the trade. You see? Now, this results in the evolution of money. The necessity for a value form grows with the increasing number and variety of the commodities exchanged. Look, I put here the Arab traders. You'll discover why. They are the ones that are selling things, getting gold, taking it to another place, and so on, in the Middle East certainly. Money first attaches itself either to the most important articles of exchange. What would they be? Home products, things that you wear, things that you use in the home was the number one thing. That was the first form of money in a certain sense. Or the chief form of wealth, which was what? Cattle in that time. So that's why from cattle you get the word capital. Cattle was measured in terms of head of cattle, caps of cattle. From caps you got capital. Nomads were the first to develop money because in their world, goods consisted of movable objects, and their mode of life brings them into contact with foreign communities with whom they exchange. So the first peoples in history to develop money were nomads. They were the first traders. It's not the city folk, it's not the people who are doing settled agriculture who were the big traders. No. They produced whatever they produced, etc. And then they spoke to nomadic pastoralist tribes कि यार तुम जाते हो उधर और फिर वापस आते हो, सीरिया तक जाते हो और वापस आते हो. So here's some stuff, go to Syria and get me some silk or get me something from China or whatever the case is. It was the nomads who first became the traders precisely because they were not the ones who were settled. They were the ones constantly moving, and they were the ones with the capacity to move. They were the ones with the animals to move. And so they became the first traders, and they became the people who first developed money. The commodity that is divisible at will has the best physical properties to serve as money. If I made this camel into money and I had to sell half the camel, I can't cut it into half because then it'll die and it'll lose its value. So I need something that retains its value despite being cut. Even wood is not like that. You cut wood, then it's not one plank. It becomes two planks. You have jod lagana padta hai. It's not good. So what is that thing? It was precious metals. Because they could be divided and subdivided. You could melt them and make them into different parts as many times as you liked. And you could recombine them, break them up, recombine them, break them up as many times as you liked. And they never lost their physical qualities as a consequence of being divided. That's why these metals were chosen to be the money commodity. He says, now, is money a mere symbol? He says the money form is but the reflex thrown upon a single commodity of the value relations between all the rest. It's because there are value relations between all the commodities that is a reflex. As a consequence of the exchange of commodities, what do you get? In that friction in between, you get the creation of money. In certain functions, money can be replaced by mere symbols of itself, and this leads to great confusion. For example, if I am selling something to you, you are selling something to me, and they're both equal, then we don't even need the money because they're equal to each other. We only need the money when they're a bit unequal, etc., right? So that means that since I can do away with money in order for a commodity to exchange with another commodity of equal value, that's why some people think that money is just merely a symbol. We are here talking about the money commodity. We're talking about gold and silver. He says, but money is exchangeable with commodities. The money commodity is exchangeable with commodities because the money commodity is itself the product of labor. Money, like every other commodity, cannot express the magnitude of its value except relatively in other commodities. This value is determined by the labor time required for its production and is expressed by the quantity of any other commodity that costs the same amount of labor time. So the labor time required to produce this gold, etc., is exactly what you can purchase with this gold in terms of another commodity. That's how money really functions. So in conclusion, in the form X commodity A is equal to Y commodity B, the equivalent form, he says, has already appeared. But it remains, the appearance is false. Why? The appearance is false, he says, in the sense that there is something in the nature of B which has made it the equivalent form. That's not the case. It's just the case that from my perspective, B is the equivalent form from the perspective of this commodity owner. From the perspective of this commodity owner, that is the equivalent form. There's nothing in the nature of B that gives it the equivalent form. It's just the nature of the exchange that does so, the social relation we've entered into. In time, one commodity becomes the equivalent commodity in which all commodities express their value. So one commodity takes the role of commodity B, and that of course is gold, or it is silver, it was cattle, it was slaves at one time, women at another time, household goods, etc. at another time. So what appears to happen is not that gold becomes money in consequence of all other commodities expressing their value in it. It's not that other commodities, because they have expressed their value in it, that's why gold has become commodity, but on the contrary, that all other commodities universally express their values in gold because it is money. This is the mistake that economists continue to make. It's gold becomes money because commodities are expressing their value in it. Gold becomes money as a consequence of the fact that commodities are expressing their value in it, and because they're exchanging, you need gold. It's not because of any intrinsic quality in gold that it becomes the money commodity, etc. Its quality is that it is itself the product of labor, and that is the relationship that you're able to establish between all the commodities and gold, as a consequence of which it becomes the money commodity or the universal equivalent.